The stars stretched endlessly outside the large windows of the SS Resolute, a ship that now carried the last hopes of humanity. Inside, the hum of machinery filled the air, mixing with the quiet voices of people trying to stay calm. Captain Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared into the vast emptiness of space. His face was tired, but his eyes stayed sharp, scanning for any sign of danger. He had seen too much loss already, and the weight of it all pressed heavily on him. Beside him, Commander Rachel Dawson leaned over a console, her fingers moving quickly across the controls. She glanced up at Lucas from time to time but said nothing. They both knew what was coming. The Krylos Collective, an alien force that had crushed Earth without mercy, was hunting them down. The Resolute wasn't just a warship anymore. It was a floating refuge for the last remnants of humanity. Civilians crowded its halls, their faces pale with fear. Scientists worked day and night in labs deep within the ship, trying to find something, anything, that could give them a fighting chance. Anything new? Lucas asked finally, breaking the silence. Rachel shook her head. Nothing solid yet, just faint signals. Could be debris, or it could be one of theirs. Lucas nodded slowly. He didn't need to say more. Both of them understood the stakes. If those signals belonged to the Krylos, they were walking straight into a trap. But running wasn't an option either. Fuel was low, supplies were dwindling, and morale among the crew was hanging by a thread. Every decision felt like rolling dice. You never knew if you'd win or lose everything. Down in the engine room, Dr. Emily Parker was hunched over a strange-looking device. Wires spilled out of it like tangled veins, and blinking lights flickered erratically. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and dark circles under her eyes showed just how little sleep she'd been getting. This machine, this prototype energy cannon, might be their only hope against the Krylos, but it was far from ready. Every test so far had ended in failure, and the thought of using it in battle terrified her. Still, she kept working. What choice did she have? On the other side of the ship, Lieutenant Daniel Cruz sat alone in the pilot's lounge. A cup of cold coffee rested on the table in front of him, untouched. His mind replayed memories of his fallen squadron, friends who hadn't made it out alive during the last stand at Earth. He clenched his fists tightly, trying to push the guilt away. It didn't work. When Sarah Bennett, a young recruit, poked her head into the room, he forced a smile. "Hey," he said softly. "What's up?" Sarah hesitated before stepping inside. "Just wanted to check on you," she admitted. "You've been quiet lately." Daniel chuckled bitterly. "Quiet? Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same determination in her eyes that he used to see in himself. Maybe there was still some fight left in him after all. Back on the bridge, the signal grew stronger. Rachel frowned as she analyzed it. "It's definitely not debris," she said quietly. "We're being followed." Lucas straightened up, his jaw tightening. "How long until they reach us?" "A few hours, maybe less." He took a deep breath, then turned to face the crew. "All right, everyone," he said firmly. "This is it. We don't run. Not this time. Prepare for battle." No one cheered. No one celebrated. Instead, they got to work, each person knowing exactly what was at stake. The SS Resolute might have been humanity's last ship, but it wasn't going down without a fight. The crew of the SS Resolute moved quickly, their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors as orders were shouted and alarms blared. Captain Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main screen that displayed the growing threat outside. The faint signals had become clearer now. A massive shadow moving against the stars. It was one of the Krylos dreadnoughts, a ship so large it could swallow the Resolute whole. Fear hung heavy in the air, but no one dared to speak it aloud. Commander Rachel Dawson worked tirelessly at her station, her fingers flying over the controls as she tried to gather more information about the enemy. "It's bigger than we thought," she said finally, her voice tight with tension. "And faster too." Lucas nodded, though his mind raced with questions. Why were they being followed? Was this just another random attack, or did the Krylos know something about the Resolute that made it special? He glanced around the room, taking in the faces of his crew. Some looked scared, others determined, but none of them seemed ready to give up. Not yet. In the lab, Dr. Emily Parker was running simulations on her prototype energy cannon. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she adjusted settings and recalibrated systems. The machine sputtered and sparked, threatening to overload again. She cursed under her breath, slamming her fist lightly against the console. "Come on," she whispered, as if pleading with the device to cooperate. Time was running out, and she knew failure wasn't an option. If this weapon didn't work, they'd have nothing left to fight with. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Daniel Cruz led a group of pilots in the hangar bay. They gathered around a holographic map projected onto the floor, studying possible routes and strategies for the upcoming battle. Sarah Bennett stood close by, listening intently while clutching her helmet tightly. This would be her first real fight, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest. When Cruz noticed her hesitation, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You'll do fine," he said simply. "Just stick with me, okay?" Sarah nodded, forcing herself to smile. "Got it." Back on the bridge, Lucas called for a meeting with his senior officers. They crowded into the small conference room, their expressions grim. Rachel started the discussion, laying out what they knew about the Krylos dreadnought. "Their weapons are stronger than ours," she explained, "and their shields can take a lot of hits before breaking. We're outnumbered and outgunned." Dr. Parker chimed in next, explaining the risks of using her prototype cannon. "If we fire it, it could destroy the dreadnought, or it could blow us apart instead," she admitted. "But right now, it's our only shot." The room fell silent as everyone processed her words. Finally, Lucas spoke. "We don't have a choice. We either fight or die trying. Everyone knows what's at stake here. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every person on this ship, for Earth, for humanity itself." After the meeting ended, Lucas took a moment alone in his quarters. He stared at a photo of his family, taken years ago before the war began. His wife and daughter smiled back at him, oblivious to the horrors that would soon come. He clenched his fists, pushing away the pain that threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't afford to break. Not now, not when so many lives depended on him. As the hours passed, the dreadnought drew closer. The crew prepared for battle, checking weapons, running drills, and saying quiet goodbyes to loved ones. In the civilian quarters, families huddled together, praying for survival. Children cried, unsure of what was happening, while parents tried to comfort them with promises they weren't sure they could keep. Finally, the moment arrived. The Krylos dreadnought emerged from the darkness, its surface glowing with eerie blue lights. It loomed over the Resolute like a predator stalking its prey. On the bridge, Lucas gave the order to raise shields and arm weapons. The crew braced themselves, their hearts pounding as the first shots were fired. The battle had begun. The SS Resolute trembled as the first wave of enemy fire struck its shields. Alarms blared throughout the ship, red lights flashing in every corridor. On the bridge, Captain Lucas Hayes gripped the railing tightly, his knuckles white as he watched the chaos unfold on the main screen. The Krylos dreadnought loomed larger than ever, its weapons firing relentlessly. The crew worked frantically, their voices overlapping as they shouted updates and warnings. "Shields are holding. For now," Commander Rachel Dawson called out, her voice strained but steady. "But we can't take much more of this." Lucas nodded sharply. "Divert power from non-essential systems. We need every bit of energy we can spare." In the engine room, Dr. Emily Parker struggled to stabilize her prototype energy cannon. Sparks flew from the machine as it groaned under the strain of being powered up too quickly. She cursed again, her hands moving rapidly over the controls. Nearby, an engineer named Marcus leaned in to help, his face streaked with grease. "We're pushing it too hard," he warned. "If we don't slow down, it'll overload before we even get a chance to use it." We don't have time to slow down. Emily snapped back, her frustration boiling over. Either we make this work, or we're all dead anyway. Above them, in the hangar bay, Lieutenant Daniel Cruz led a squadron of fighters into space. Their small ships darted around the massive dreadnought, trying to draw its attention away from the Resolute. Laser blasts lit up the darkness as the pilots dodged and weaved through enemy fire. Sarah Bennett stayed close to Cruz, her heart racing as she followed his lead. This was nothing like the simulation she'd trained on. Out here, one wrong move meant death. "Stay sharp, everyone." Cruz's voice crackled over the comms. "They're targeting the Resolute. Keep them busy while we figure out our next move." Back on the bridge, Lucas made a decision. "Rachel, send out the decoy drones. Let's see if we can trick them into wasting ammo." Rachel hesitated for a moment. "It's risky. If they realize what we're doing." "They won't," Lucas interrupted firmly. "Just do it." The decoys launched moments later, tiny robotic ships programmed to mimic the Resolute's signal. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. The Krylos shifted their focus, sending waves of smaller fighters after the drones. But the relief was short-lived. The Dreadnought's main cannons turned back toward the Resolute, their glowing tips charging for another devastating shot. Down in the civilian quarters, panic spread like wildfire. Parents clutched their children, whispering prayers or singing songs to calm them. An elderly man named Harold sat quietly by a window, staring out at the battle raging beyond the glass. His wife had died during Earth's fall, and he felt no fear now. Only sadness that humanity had been reduced to this. Still, he held on to hope. As long as the Resolute kept fighting, there was a chance, however small, that someone might survive to tell the story of what happened here. On the bridge, Rachel spotted something unusual on her console. "Captain, I'm picking up fluctuations in their shield patterns. It looks like weaknesses." Lucas leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Weaknesses? Where?" "Along the underside of the Dreadnought. They're minimal, but if we hit them just right, we might be able to break through." Lucas finished for her. He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to Cruz. Tell him to regroup and target those weak points." Cruz's voice came back almost immediately. "Understood, Captain. We'll do what we can." As the fighter squadron adjusted their course, the tension aboard the Resolute grew unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. Would the plan work, or would this be the end? In the lab, Emily finally managed to stabilize the energy cannon. Her hand shook as she activated the final sequence. "It's ready," she whispered to herself. "Let's hope it's enough." The countdown began. The Resolute prepared to fire its last desperate weapon. Outside, the Krylos dreadnought continued its assault, unaware of the storm about to hit it. The fighter squadron, led by Lieutenant Daniel Cruz, raced toward the underside of the Krylos dreadnought, their small ships weaving through bursts of enemy fire. The weak points in the dreadnought's shields had been identified, but reaching them was no easy task. Laser blasts streaked past Sarah Bennett's cockpit, so close she could feel the heat radiating off her ship's hull. Her hands trembled on the controls, but she forced herself to focus. "Stay calm," she muttered under her breath. "Just stay calm." Cruz's voice crackled over the comms. "We're almost there. Keep your eyes open for any surprises." As they approached the target area, the Krylos fighters swarmed around them, trying to block their path. One of Cruz's wingmen, a pilot named Alex, shouted a warning. "Multiple bogies incoming." "Break formation," Cruz ordered. The squadron scattered, each pilot dodging and returning fire as best they could. Explosions lit up the void of space, debris floating aimlessly where ships had once been. Sarah clenched her teeth, firing her lasers at an enemy fighter that strafed too close. It exploded in a flash of light, but another took its place almost instantly. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Lucas Hayes watched the battle unfold on the main screen. His jaw was tight, his mind racing with calculations. The energy cannon was ready, but timing was critical. If the fighters couldn't hold the Krylos' attention long enough, The shot would miss, and they wouldn't get a second chance. Commander Dawson. Status update. Lucas barked. Rachel glanced at her console. Their shields are fluctuating. The weak spots are exposed, but not for long. We need to act now. Lucas nodded. Patch me through to Dr. Parker. Tell her we're ready. In the lab, Emily stood beside the massive energy cannon, her heart pounding like a drum. When the call came through, she took a deep breath and activated the machine. A low hum filled the room, growing louder as power surged through the device. Lights flickered across the ship, dimming momentarily as energy was diverted to the weapon. "This is it," she whispered, gripping the edge of the console. Outside, Cruz and his team continued their assault, drawing the enemy's fire away from the Resolute. They launched missiles at the Dreadnought's weak points, creating small breaches in its defenses. Each hit brought them closer to success, but also closer to disaster. One of Cruz's pilots, a young man named Kyle, screamed over the comms as his ship was hit. His fighter spun out of control before exploding in a burst of flames. "Kyle's down," Alex shouted, his voice breaking. Cruz didn't respond. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Gritting his teeth, he pressed forward, leading the remaining pilots toward their objective. "Keep moving," he yelled. "We're almost there." Back on the Resolute, Emily gave the final command. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The energy cannon roared to life, sending a blinding beam of light hurtling toward the Krylos dreadnought. The beam struck true, piercing through the weakened section of the alien ship's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening explosion, the dreadnought began to break apart. Chunks of metal and glowing fragments drifted into space as the massive vessel collapsed in on itself. Cheers erupted on the bridge of the Resolute. Rachel let out a shaky laugh, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." But the celebration was short-lived. As the crew watched, the shockwave from the explosion rippled outward, catching several of the fighter ships, including Cruz, in its wake. Sarah's eyes widened in horror as she saw his ship disappear into the chaos. "Cruz!" She screamed into the comms, but there was no response. Captain Hayes lowered his head, his fists clenched tightly. Victory had come at a cost, and the weight of it settled heavily on his shoulders. Around him, the crew fell silent, their joy replaced by grief. The battle was won, but the scars would remain for everyone. The SS Resolute drifted silently through space, its crew still reeling from the aftermath of the battle. The Krylos dreadnought was gone, reduced to floating debris, but the victory felt hollow. On the bridge, Captain Lucas Hayes stared at the main screen, where the remnants of the alien ship floated like a graveyard. His hands rested on the railing, his knuckles white as he struggled to process what had happened. The cheers that had erupted moments earlier had faded into silence, replaced by the heavy weight of loss. Lieutenant Daniel Cruz's name was added to the memorial wall in the ship's hallway later that day. It was a simple plaque, etched with the names of those who had given their lives for humanity's survival. As Lucas stood before it, he traced the letters of Cruz's name with his fingers. He remembered the young pilot's determination, his bravery, and the way he had always pushed others to keep going no matter how dire things seemed. Now he was just another name on a list far too long. Nearby, Sarah Bennett leaned against the wall, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but she refused to let herself break down completely. She replayed the moment Cruz's ship vanished over and over in her mind, unable to shake the image. When Lucas approached her, she looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have done more," she said. "If I'd been faster, if I'd stayed closer." Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but gentle. "You did everything you could," he told her. "Cruz knew the risks. We all do. But he made his choice because he believed in something bigger than himself. Don't dishonor that by doubting yourself." Sarah nodded slowly, though the guilt lingered. She didn't trust herself to speak again, so she turned and walked away, heading back to the hangar bay. There she sat alone in her fighter, staring at the controls. She promised herself she would train harder, fight smarter, and make sure Cruz's sacrifice wasn't wasted. In the lab, Dr. Emily Parker worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by firing the energy cannon. The weapon had saved them, but it had also taken a toll on the ship's systems. Sparks flew as she and Marcus struggled to fix burned-out circuits and reroute power lines. Her hands moved quickly, but her mind kept drifting back to the battle. She thought about Cruz, about the pilots who hadn't returned, and about the civilians aboard the Resolute who relied on her to keep them safe. The pressure was overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus. One step at a time, she muttered under her breath. Commander Rachel Dawson spent most of her time coordinating repairs and ensuring the ship remained operational. She walked through the corridors, checking on crew members, and offering words of encouragement whenever she could. Despite her efforts to stay strong, she couldn't ignore the sadness in everyone's eyes. Even the civilians, who had celebrated briefly after the battle, now seemed quieter, more subdued. They carried their grief differently. Some prayed, some cried, and others simply went about their tasks in silence. Later that evening, Lucas called a meeting with his senior officers. The room was dimly lit, the mood somber. Rachel gave a status update on the ship's condition. "We're stable for now," she reported, "but we need to find a safe place to regroup. Our supplies are running low, and the engines won't hold up much longer without maintenance." Emily added, "And we can't rely on the energy cannon again anytime soon. It's too unstable." Lucas listened carefully, then nodded. "We'll set course for the nearest star system. Hopefully, we'll find resources there, or at least a temporary refuge." As the meeting ended, Lucas stayed behind, gazing out a nearby window. The stars twinkled in the distance, indifferent to the struggles of those aboard the Resolute. He thought about Earth, about the billions of lives lost, and about the few thousand people still counting on him to lead them. It was a burden he carried willingly, but it didn't make it any easier. For now, they had survived. But survival wasn't enough, not when the galaxy was filled with enemies like the Krylos. Lucas clenched his fists, resolve hardening within him. They might be battered and broken, but they weren't defeated. Not yet. The SS Resolute limped through space, its engine sputtering as it made its way toward the nearest star system. The crew worked around the clock to keep the ship running, patching up damage and rationing supplies. Morale was low, but there was a quiet determination in the air. They had survived the Krylos dreadnought, and that gave them a fragile sense of hope. Still, the losses weighed heavily on everyone, especially Captain Lucas Hayes. Lucas stood on the bridge, staring at the navigation screen. The star system they were heading toward was uncharted territory, a gamble in every sense of the word. "We'll know more when we get closer," Rachel Dawson said, her voice calm but cautious. She adjusted the sensors, trying to pick up any signs of danger or opportunity. "For now, all we can do is stay alert." In the hangar bay, Sarah Bennett threw herself into training. She spent hours practicing maneuvers in her fighter, pushing herself harder than ever before. The memory of Lieutenant Cruz's sacrifice drove her forward, fueling her determination to improve. When she wasn't flying, she studied tactical simulations, analyzing every move Cruz had made during the battle. She wanted to understand his decisions, to learn from him even though he was gone. Dr. Emily Parker continued working on the energy cannon, determined to make it more reliable for future use. Her hands moved steadily over the controls, adjusting settings and running diagnostics. Marcus stayed by her side, offering help whenever she needed it. "You're going to burn yourself out if you keep this up," he warned one day, handing her a cup of coffee. Emily accepted it with a small smile. "Maybe," she admitted, "but I can't stop now. If we run into another Krylos ship, we'll need every advantage we can get." As the Resolute approached the star system, strange readings began to appear on the sensors. Rachel frowned as she analyzed the data. "There's something out there," she said finally. looking up at Lucas. "It's not natural." "What do you mean?" Lucas asked, stepping closer. "It's artificial. Some kind of structure. Big." Lucas exchanged a glance with Rachel. Could it be a trap? Or was it something else entirely? He turned to the comms officer. "Send out a probe. Let's see what we're dealing with." Minutes later, the probe transmitted images back to the ship. What they saw left everyone speechless. A massive alien vessel floated in the darkness, its surface covered in strange symbols and glowing patterns. It looked abandoned, its systems dark and silent, but there was something unsettling about it, as if it were waiting. "We need to investigate," Lucas decided after a long pause. "If there's anything useful inside, weapons, technology, it could save us." Rachel hesitated. "And if it's a trap, then we'll deal with it," Lucas replied firmly. "We don't have a choice." A team was assembled to board the mysterious vessel, led by Commander Dawson. Sarah volunteered immediately, eager to prove herself after the battle. Emily joined as well, hoping to find technology that could aid their survival. Armed with scanners and weapons, the group boarded a shuttle and headed toward the alien ship. Inside, the air was cold and stale, the silence oppressive. Strange lights flickered faintly along the walls, casting eerie shadows. The team moved cautiously, scanning every room they entered. In one chamber, they found rows of pods, some empty, others containing alien bodies frozen in stasis. Emily examined one of the pods closely, her brow furrowed. "These aren't Krylos," she murmured. "They're something else." The low hum of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the narrow corridors of the alien ship. The team froze, their weapons raised as they braced for whatever was coming. Sarah's hands trembled slightly on her rifle, but she forced herself to stay focused. Emily glanced up from the control panel, her face pale but determined. "Stay close," Rachel whispered, her voice steadied despite the tension in the air. From around the corner emerged a figure, tall and slender, with smooth metallic skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its eyes glowed a soft blue, scanning the group with an unreadable expression. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rachel stepped forward cautiously, lowering her weapon just enough to show she wasn't hostile. "We mean no harm," she said slowly, though she doubted the creature would understand. To everyone's surprise, the alien spoke, not in words, but in a series of melodic tones that resonated in their minds. A strange warmth spread through them, calming their fear. Through the tones, images flashed in their thoughts. Planets, stars, and battles long past. It was trying to communicate. Emily stepped forward next, her scientific curiosity overpowering her caution. "It's showing us something," she murmured, staring at the glowing symbols on the walls. "This ship belongs to another species, the Zetherians. They were enslaved by the Krylos Collective." Rachel frowned. "Enslaved? What happened to them?" More images flooded their minds. Explosions, destruction, and finally, silence. The Zetherians had rebelled against their oppressors, but at great cost. This ship was one of the last remnants of their civilization. The alien before them placed a hand over its chest, then gestured toward the team. It seemed to be offering help. "We need to take this chance," Emily said urgently. "If they have technology or knowledge about the Krylos, it could save us." Sarah nodded, though her grip on her weapon didn't loosen. "But how do we know we can trust them?" Before anyone could answer, the alien extended a thin arm, pointing toward a doorway at the end of the corridor. Lights flickered along the edges of the door, inviting them inside. Rachel exchanged a glance with the others, then gave a small nod. "Let's go, but stay alert." Inside the chamber, they found rows of consoles and holographic displays, all humming with energy. Emily immediately began examining the equipment, her fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. "This is incredible," she breathed. "Their tech is far more advanced than ours. If we can adapt even a fraction of it." Rachel interrupted, her tone cautious. "Focus, Emily. We don't have much time. As Emily worked, the alien stood nearby, watching silently. Occasionally, it would touch one of the panels, guiding her toward specific functions. Slowly, pieces of information began to come together. The Cytherians had developed a way to disrupt Krylos' shield systems, a weakness humanity could exploit. We can use this, Emily said excitedly, holding up a small device she'd managed to extract from the console. It's a frequency modulator. If we install it on our weapons, we might be able to penetrate their shields more effectively. Rachel smiled for the first time in days. Good work. Let's get back to the Resolute and see if we can make it work. As they prepared to leave, the alien stopped them, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. Again, the melodic tones filled their minds, this time accompanied by an image of the star system they were in. One planet glowed brighter than the others, a safe haven, perhaps. Thank you, Rachel said softly, bowing her head in gratitude. The alien nodded once, then stepped back into the shadows. Back on the Resolute, the team shared what they had learned with Captain Lucas Hayes. His eyes lit up when he saw the device Emily held. This could change everything, he said, his voice filled with cautious hope. But we'll need to test it carefully. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of purpose aboard the ship. The crew worked together to integrate the Cytherian technology into their systems, their movements quicker, their spirits lighter. Even Sarah felt a renewed determination, knowing they now had a fighting chance. But as the Resolute set course for the glowing planet, none of them knew what dangers or opportunities lay ahead. Survival was still uncertain, but for now, hope burned brighter than ever. The SS Resolute approached the glowing planet cautiously, its surface shimmering like liquid gold under the light of a distant sun. The crew gathered on the bridge, their eyes fixed on the main screen as the ship descended through layers of thick, swirling clouds. Captain Lucas Hayes stood at the helm, his hands gripping the railing tightly. Sensors show breathable air and stable conditions, Rachel Dawson reported, her voice steady but tinged with caution. But we won't know for sure until we land. As the ship touched down on a wide grassy plain, the tension aboard was palpable. Everyone knew this moment could mean life or death for humanity's last survivors. A team was quickly assembled to explore the area, led by Rachel and including Sarah Bennett, Emily Parker, and a few armed guards. They stepped out onto the soft ground, their boots sinking slightly into the earth. The air smelled sweet, almost floral, and the sky above was painted in hues of orange and pink. "It's beautiful," Emily whispered, looking around in awe. Strange plants swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves glowing faintly as if alive with energy. Small creatures darted between the foliage, their movements quick and curious. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sense of peace. Sarah adjusted the strap of her rifle, scanning the horizon warily. "Beautiful doesn't mean safe," she reminded them, her tone sharp but not unkind. She had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Rachel nodded in agreement. "Stay alert. We need to find resources, water, food, anything that can help us repair the ship." They split into pairs, each group heading in different directions. Rachel and Sarah headed toward a cluster of tall, crystalline structures that jutted out of the ground like spires. As they drew closer, they noticed intricate patterns etched into the crystals, pulsing faintly with light. "These look artificial," Rachel said, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "Like ruins." Before they could investigate further, a low rumble echoed through the air. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and the glowing crystals brightened suddenly. Sarah raised her weapon, her heart pounding. "What's happening?" From the shadows emerged figures, humanoid but distinctly alien, their skin covered in shimmering scales that reflected the sunlight. Their eyes glowed faintly, matching the rhythm of the crystals. They moved slowly, raising their hands in a gesture of peace. One of them stepped forward, speaking in melodic tones similar to those of the Cytherian they had encountered earlier. Emily and her group arrived moments later, having heard the commotion. When the aliens saw the device she carried, the frequency modulator, they stopped and exchanged looks. One of them pointed to it, then to themselves, nodding eagerly. They recognize it, Emily realized aloud. They must have worked with the Zetherians before. Through gestures and shared images in their minds, the aliens communicated that they were refugees, survivors of another species enslaved by the Krylos Collective. This planet was their sanctuary, and they welcomed the humans to stay. For now. In return, they offered access to hidden caches of resources buried deep within the crystal structures. Back on the Resolute, the crew worked tirelessly to gather supplies and begin repairs. The aliens proved invaluable, guiding them to water sources and teaching them how to harness energy from the glowing crystals. Morale improved significantly, and laughter could be heard echoing through the halls once again. Captain Hayes stood outside the ship one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery colors. Rachel joined him, holding 2 cups of tea made from local herbs. "We've been given a second chance," she said softly. Lucas took the cup, nodding thoughtfully. "For now, yes. But the Krylos aren't gone. We'll need to prepare for when they come." Rachel sighed, staring at the horizon, one battle at a time. Behind them, the glow of the planet illuminated their faces, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest times, hope could still shine brightly. The days passed quickly as the crew of the SS Resolute worked alongside the alien refugees to repair their ship and gather supplies. The glowing planet had proven to be a treasure trove of resources, with its crystal structures providing both energy and materials that were far more advanced than anything humanity had access to before. Emily Parker spent most of her time studying the technology, learning how it functioned and finding ways to adapt it for use on the Resolute. Her hands moved deftly over strange consoles, her mind racing with possibilities. Sarah Bennett trained harder than ever, pushing herself to master new combat techniques, using insights gained from the aliens. They had shown her how to fight smarter, not just harder, how to anticipate an enemy's movements and strike where they were weakest. She practiced alone in the hangar bay late at night, her determination unwavering. Every punch, every dodge, was done in memory of Lieutenant Cruz. "I'll make you proud," she whispered under her breath after each session. Captain Lucas Hayes watched his crew grow stronger, their spirits lifted by the unexpected alliance with the alien refugees. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this peace wouldn't last. The Krylos Collective wasn't known for mercy, and if they discovered the location of this sanctuary, they would stop at nothing to destroy it. He often stood outside the ship, staring up at the stars, wondering when, and where, they would strike next. One evening, Rachel Dawson approached him, holding 2 cups of tea made from local herbs. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently, handing him one of the cups. "What's on your mind?" Lucas took a sip, letting the warmth spread through him. "We're safe here, for now. But safety is temporary. We need to plan ahead." Rachel nodded, understanding his concern. "The aliens have agreed to help us fortify the area. They know what the Krylos are capable of, and they want to protect their home as much as we do." "That's good," Lucas replied, though his expression remained troubled. "But we can't rely solely on them. We need to find allies, others who are willing to stand against the Krylos." His words sparked an idea in Rachel's mind. "What about the Zetherians? The ones we met earlier. They mentioned other survivors scattered across the galaxy. Maybe we can find them." Lucas considered this, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was a risky plan, but it might be their best chance. "We'll send out probes to search for signs of life. If we can locate even a few ships or colonies, it could make all the difference." Meanwhile, tensions began to rise among the civilian passengers aboard the Resolute. While some embraced the new alliance with the aliens, others were wary, fearing betrayal or danger. An elderly man named Harold voiced his concerns during a meeting. "How do we know we can trust them?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "They're strangers, just like the Krylos once were." Emily stepped forward to address the crowd. "These aliens aren't our enemies," she said firmly. "They've given us food, shelter, and technology that could save us. Without them, we'd still be drifting aimlessly in space." Her words seemed to calm the group, but the unease lingered. Captain Hayes knew it was his responsibility to keep everyone united, no matter how divided opinions became. A breakthrough came when one of the probes detected faint signals near a distant moon. The readings suggested the presence of another alien species, one that had evaded the Krylos for years. Lucas wasted no time ordering the Resolute to investigate. As the ship prepared to leave orbit, the alien refugees gathered to bid them farewell. One of the leaders placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, speaking in melodic tones that resonated deeply. Through the mental images, Lucas understood. "Stay strong. Together, we will endure." With those words echoing in his mind, Lucas gave the order to depart. The glowing planet faded into the distance as the Resolute entered hyperspace, heading toward the unknown. Hope burned brightly within the crew, tempered by the knowledge that challenges lay ahead. Whatever awaited them, they would face it together, as humanity's last hope. The SS Resolute emerged from hyperspace near the distant moon, its surface cratered and barren under the dim light of a dying star. Captain Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, his eyes scanning the main screen as sensors began picking up faint signals. "We're not alone here," Rachel Dawson said, her voice steady but tinged with caution. "Multiple ships, small ones. They're hiding." Lucas nodded, his jaw tightening. "Let's see if they'll talk to us." A message was sent out, broadcasting their peaceful intentions. At first, there was no response. The silence stretched on, heavy and uncertain. Then, slowly, a ship emerged from behind the moon. A sleek vessel unlike anything they had seen before. Its design was angular and sharp, with glowing blue lines running along its hull like veins. "They're hailing us," the comms officer announced. On the screen appeared a face, not human, but not entirely alien either. The being had smooth, pale skin and large, reflective eyes that seemed to look straight through them. It spoke in halting, accented English. "Who are you?" Lucas stepped forward, his expression calm but firm. "We're survivors from Earth. We've been fighting the Krylos Collective. We're looking for allies." The alien studied them for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "You've come to the right place. We are the Valens. Like you, we have suffered at the hands of the Krylos." Hope flickered in Lucas's chest, but he remained cautious. "Can we trust them?" he asked Rachel quietly. "They wouldn't have answered if they weren't willing to listen," she replied. "Let's hear what they have to say." The Valens invited a small team aboard their ship to discuss an alliance. Sarah Bennett joined the group, eager to prove herself after weeks of training. Emily Parker came too, hoping to learn more about their technology. When they arrived, they were greeted by the leader of the Valens, a tall figure named Zenara. Her presence commanded respect, her voice calm but authoritative. "The Krylos are strong," Zenara began, "but they are not invincible. Together, we can weaken them." Emily leaned forward, intrigued. "How?" Zenara gestured to a holographic display showing maps of star systems. "There is a key facility the Krylos use to control their fleets. Destroy it, and their power will falter." It was a risky plan, but one that offered humanity a real chance to fight back. Back on the Resolute, Lucas called a meeting with his senior officers. "If we succeed, it could turn the tide of the war," he said. "But if we fail—" "We won't fail," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. "Not this time." Preparations began immediately. The crew worked tirelessly to integrate the Zetherian and Valen technologies into their systems, making the Resolute faster, stronger, and better equipped for battle. Morale soared as everyone focused on the mission ahead. Even the civilians pitched in where they could, repairing uniforms or preparing meals for the crew. On the day of departure, the Valens escorted the Resolute to the edge of their territory. Zenara approached Lucas one last time. "Remember," she said, "you are not alone anymore. Fight with courage." As the ships parted ways, Lucas returned to the bridge, staring out at the stars. He thought about everything they had lost, their homes, their loved ones, their planet, but also about everything they still had. Each other, their determination, and a newfound sense of purpose. "Corset, Captain," Rachel reported, her voice filled with quiet resolve. Lucas took a deep breath, then gave the order. "Engage." The Resolute surged forward, its engines roaring as it headed toward the Krylos facility. Ahead lay danger, pain, and sacrifice, but also hope. Humanity might have been battered and broken, but it wasn't defeated. Not yet. As long as there were people willing to stand against the darkness, there would always be a chance for light to prevail. And so, with courage in their hearts and fire in their souls, the last remnants of humanity prepared to face their greatest challenge yet.